The distant echo of church bells sent a chill down Rebecca Dale's spine as she stood frozen in the tiny back room of Bandera's only chapel. Through the small window, she could see the Texas sun beating down mercilessly on the dusty Main Street, just as unforgiving as the whispers that had followed her for weeks. The year was 1875, and in this small frontier town, reputation was everything. Hers now lay shattered at her feet, along with the bouquet of wildflowers she had dropped when Preacher Johnson delivered the devastating news. "I'm sorry, Miss Dale. Mr. Thompson will not be coming today. He left town on the morning stage." Rebecca's trembling hands instinctively moved to her stomach, still flat, but harboring a secret that had pushed her fiancé to flee. The whispers would start soon if they hadn't already. The unmarried schoolteacher with child. She could already imagine the pitying looks, the disgrace, the loss of her position. "Miss Dale." The preacher's voice was gentle but uncomfortable. "Perhaps you should sit down." The small room began to spin. The carefully arranged white flowers, her mother's borrowed lace handkerchief, the Bible verse she had selected for the ceremony, all meaningless now. Beyond the door waited a dozen townsfolk, including her widowed father who had traveled 3 days to give his only daughter away. "I need air," Rebecca whispered, fumbling with the back door latch. She couldn't face them, not yet, perhaps not ever. The Texas heat hit her like a physical force as she stumbled into the alleyway behind the church. Tears blurred her vision as she clutched at the rough wooden siding, her knees threatening to buckle. 22 years old, abandoned, ruined. "Whoa there, madam. You all right?" The deep voice startled her. Through her tears, Rebecca made out the tall figure of a man leading a horse down the narrow passage. The broad brim of his hat shadowed his features, but she recognized him immediately, Randall Irving, who owned the cattle spread north of town. They had exchanged pleasantries when he occasionally attended Sunday services, but little more. "Mr. Irving." She straightened, desperately trying to compose herself, though she knew her tear-streaked face and wedding dress told the whole humiliating story. He tied his horse to a post and approached cautiously, as one might a spooked filly. "Something's happened." It wasn't a question. His eyes, the warm brown of coffee with just a splash of cream, moved from her face to the chapel door and back again. Understanding dawned in his expression. "He's not coming." Again, not a question. Rebecca felt fresh tears welling. "No," Randall's jaw tightened, his weathered face hardening. "Thompson," she nodded, unable to speak. "Damn fool," he muttered, then immediately removed his hat. "Begging your pardon, Miss Dale." A hysterical laugh escaped her lips. "Propriety seems rather pointless now, Mr. Irving." His gaze was too knowing, too perceptive. "There's more to it than just cold feet, isn't there?" The directness of his question struck her like a physical blow. In this moment of complete vulnerability, she found herself unable to maintain the lie she'd prepared for the town. "I'm with child," she whispered, the words hanging in the hot, still air between them. She expected disgust, perhaps a hasty retreat. Instead, Randall Irving's expression softened with something that looked remarkably like compassion. "Does your pa know?" "No one knows. Only Daniel, Mr. Thompson, and now you." She wiped her tears with shaking hands. "I suppose everyone will know soon enough." Randall was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant, as though working through some complex problem. Then, with a decisiveness that seemed characteristic of him, he replaced his hat. "Miss Dale," he said, his voice steady, "I know this isn't proper and I know we barely know each other, but I'd like to make you an offer." Rebecca stared at him, uncomprehending. "I'll be your husband now." The words hung between them, impossible, outlandish. "Mr. Irving, you can't possibly." "I can and I will if you'll have me." His voice was calm, practical. You need a husband. That child needs a father, and I." He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his face. "I have a ranch that needs a woman's touch, and I've been alone too long." "But you don't love me," Rebecca whispered, the words sounding childish even to her own ears. "No, madam, I don't," he answered honestly. "Not yet. But I respect you, and I think we could build something solid together. Better than some marriages that start with grand passion and end in bitter disappointment." His eyes flicked meaningfully toward the church. "The town will talk," she said weakly. "Let them," he shrugged. "They'll talk anyway. This way at least you and your child have protection, a name." Rebecca's mind raced. What choice did she have? Return to her father's distant farm in disgrace, face the town's judgment alone, lose her position at the schoolhouse once her condition became evident. "The preacher's still inside," Randall said quietly. "Your family and friends too. We could do this now. Give them something to celebrate instead of pity." His practicality was strangely comforting. This man, this near stranger, was offering her salvation with the same matter-of-fact attitude he might use to discuss the weather or cattle prices. "Why would you do this?" she asked, needing to understand. Something shadowed his eyes. "My mother found herself in a similar position once. No one stepped forward for her." The simple statement contained volumes. Before she could question further, the back door opened and her father's worried face appeared. "Becky, what in God's name are you doing out here?" Richard Dale looked confused at finding his daughter in the company of a rancher behind the church, when she should be preparing to walk down the aisle. Rebecca opened her mouth, but no words came. "Mr. Dale," Randall stepped forward, extending his hand. "I believe I can explain." Her father looked between them, suspicion dawning. "Mr. Irving, isn't it? From the North Ranch?" "Yes, sir. I understand you're expecting a wedding today." "Well, I was," her father said bitterly, "until that Thompson boy showed his true colors." "Pa," Rebecca began, but Randall continued smoothly. "Mr. Dale, I've just asked your daughter if she would do me the honor of becoming my wife. Today." Her father's mouth fell open. "What in tarnation?" "I know it's sudden," Randall continued, "and I apologize for not approaching you properly beforehand, but I've admired Miss Rebecca for some time, and when I heard what happened—" He trailed off, the implication clear. Rebecca marveled at how easily the partial lie fell from his lips, how confident he appeared. She saw her father studying Randall's strong, steady frame, the quality of his clothes not fancy but well-made, the respectful way he held his hat. "Becky," her father turned to her, "is this what you want?" A loaded question if ever there was one. Did she want to marry a man she barely knew? No. Did she want to face life as an unwed mother? Also no. Did she want the protection and respectability Randall Irving offered? Yes, desperately. "It is, Pa," she said, finding strength in the decision. "Mr. Irving Randall has made me a generous offer, and I've accepted." Her father's shrewd eyes missed nothing. "This is mighty convenient timing." "Life rarely offers second chances, Mr. Dale," Randall said. "I'm taking mine while I can." Something in her father's expression shifted, resignation, perhaps, or recognition of the limited options before them. He nodded once, sharply. "Well then, let's not keep the preacher waiting any longer." 20 minutes later, Rebecca found herself standing before Preacher Johnson once again, this time beside a different man. The small congregation buzzed with confused whispers. Her two closest friends, Mary and Elizabeth, looked stunned. The handful of Thompson relatives who traveled for the ceremony wore expressions ranging from confusion to relief. "Dearly beloved," the preacher began, visibly disconcerted but professional enough to continue. "We are gathered here today." Rebecca barely heard the words. She was acutely aware of the tall figure beside her, the unfamiliar scent of leather and open air that clung to him. When he took her hand for the exchange of vows, his calloused palm was warm and steady against her trembling fingers. I, Randall James Irving, take thee, Rebecca Jane Dale. His voice was clear and certain, betraying none of the madness of what they were doing. When her turn came, Rebecca forced strength into her voice, knowing that any hesitation would fuel town gossip for months to come. I, Rebecca Jane Dale, take thee, Randall James Irving. The simple gold band he produced, where had he gotten it on such short notice, slid onto her finger, slightly too large but present. Real. Binding. I now pronounce you man and wife. There was a moment's hesitation before Randall leaned down and placed the briefest, most respectful of kisses on her lips. His eyes met hers as he pulled away, communicating something she couldn't quite interpret. Not love, certainly, but perhaps a promise of protection, of partnership. The small reception that followed at Bandera's only hotel was a strained affair. Rebecca's father pulled Randall aside for what appeared to be a serious conversation, while the women of the town descended upon Rebecca with barely concealed curiosity. "How long have you and Mr. Irving been courting?" asked Mrs. Finch, the banker's wife. "Did you know Daniel wasn't coming?" whispered Elizabeth. "Such a fortunate coincidence that Mr. Irving was prepared to step in," remarked Mrs. Peterson, her tone implying it was anything but coincidental. Rebecca answered as vaguely as possible, feeling like an actress in a poorly rehearsed play. When Randall finally returned to her side, she nearly sagged with relief. "Mrs. Irving," he said, offering his arm, "I believe it's time we headed home. Home." The words sent a flutter of panic through her chest. His home would now be hers, his bedroom, his bed. As if reading her thoughts, he leaned closer. "You have nothing to fear from me tonight," he murmured for her ears alone, "or any night until you're ready." The simple reassurance brought tears to her eyes. What kind of man was this, who would claim another man's child as his own and ask nothing in return? They said their goodbyes, Rebecca embracing her father with promises to visit soon. As Randall helped her into his wagon, the reality of what she had done began to sink in. She was married to a man she barely knew, headed to a ranch she had never seen, to begin a life she had never imagined. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows as they left Bandera behind. Rebecca sat rigidly beside her new husband, hands folded tightly in her lap. Her wedding dress sewn for another man, another life rustled with each movement of the wagon. "It's about an hour to the ranch," Randall said, breaking the tense silence. "Not far, but far enough from town to give you some peace." "Thank you," she said, the words inadequate for the magnitude of what he had done. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." He glanced at her, then back to the road. "This isn't a debt, Rebecca. It's a marriage. Different than most in how it started, perhaps, but a marriage all the same." "But why? You could have any woman in the county. Why burden yourself with me and my situation?" Randall was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was thoughtful. "I'm 30 years old, Miss Dale Rebecca. I've been running that ranch alone since I was 22 when my father passed. I've built something good there, something that will last. But a ranch isn't just land and cattle. It's a home, or it should be." He adjusted his grip on the reins. "I've known for a while I needed to find a wife, but I'm not one for courting and sweet talk. Most women want romance, pretty words. I'm not built that way." He glanced at her. "You strike me as a practical woman, a good teacher from what I hear. Kind but firm. You need security and protection." "I need a partner, someone to make that ranch a home." A small smile touched his lips. "And I've always wanted children." The mention of the child growing inside her made Rebecca instinctively touch her stomach. "And you don't mind that it's not yours?" "That child will be mine in every way that matters," he said firmly. "No one need ever know different if that's what you want." The road curved, revealing a sweeping vista of grassland tinged golden in the late-day sun. In the distance, Rebecca could make out a cluster of buildings nestled against a line of trees, the Irving Ranch. "It's beautiful," she breathed, the first genuine sentiment she'd felt since the nightmare at the church began. "It is," he agreed, pride evident in his voice. 3,000 acres, good water year-round from the creek, healthy herd. My father started with nothing, built it all. As they drew closer, Rebecca could see a substantial 2-story house, painted white with a wide porch. Several outbuildings, a corral with horses, and what appeared to be a bunkhouse completed the scene. It was larger than she had imagined, more established. "How many hands do you employ?" she asked, trying to prepare herself for her new role. 6 full-time, more during roundup. Most stay in the bunkhouse, but Mrs. Colton, the cook, has a small cabin behind the main house. She's getting on in years but makes the best biscuits in 3 counties. A tall, thin woman emerged from the main house as they pulled up, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Behind her stood 2 ranch hands, curiosity evident on their weathered faces. "Mr. Irving," the woman called, "we weren't expecting you back until tomorrow." Her eyes widened as she took in Rebecca in her wedding dress. "Oh my goodness." Randall jumped down from the wagon, then came around to help Rebecca descend. His hands were strong at her waist, lifting her easily to the ground. The gesture, intimate yet proper, reminded her forcefully of their new relationship. "Mrs. Colton, everyone," he announced, maintaining his hand at the small of Rebecca's back. "I'd like you to meet Rebecca Irving, my wife." The stunned silence that followed was broken only by the distant lowing of cattle. Mrs. Colton recovered first, rushing forward with her hands extended. "Well, I never. Mr. Irving, you sly fox, not a word to any of us." She took Rebecca's hands in her own. "Welcome, Mrs. Irving. My stars, but we're not prepared for a new mistress of the house." It was a rather sudden decision, Rebecca managed, hyper-aware of the ring on her finger, the unfamiliar weight of her new surname. "Love is like that sometimes," Mrs. Colton beamed, misinterpreting completely. "Now you must be exhausted. Come inside and I'll show you around while the men take care of the wagon." Randall gave Rebecca's hand a reassuring squeeze before releasing her to Mrs. Colton's enthusiastic care. As she was led toward the house that was now her home, Rebecca felt a peculiar mixture of terror and relief. She had survived the day, maintained some semblance of dignity. What tomorrow would bring remained to be seen. The house was spacious and well built, if sparsely furnished. The downstairs contained a large kitchen with a sturdy wooden table, a formal dining room rarely used according to Mrs. Colton, a comfortable sitting room and what appeared to be Randall's office. Upstairs were 4 bedrooms, including the master at the back of the house overlooking the creek. "Mr. Irving's well. Your room now too, I suppose," Mrs. Colton said, pushing open the door with a slight blush. Rebecca stepped inside, taking in the large 4-poster bed, the masculine furniture, the distinct lack of any feminine touches. A single photograph on the dresser showed a middle-aged couple, Randall's parents, she presumed. "I'll have fresh linens brought up, Mrs. Colton continued, bustling about. "And water for washing. You'll want to change, I'm sure." Rebecca looked down at her wedding dress, suddenly desperate to be free of it. "Yes, thank you, but I'm afraid I don't have any other clothes with me." "Oh," Mrs. Colton looked chagrined. "Of course not, with it being so sudden." "Well, perhaps one of my nightgowns would do for tonight, and tomorrow we can figure something more suitable." Left alone, Rebecca sank onto the edge of the bed, finally allowing the full weight of the day to crash over her. Married to a stranger. carrying another man's child, living on a ranch miles from town. Every assumption about her future had been upended in the space of hours. When Randall knocked and entered sometime later, she had changed into Mrs. Colton's borrowed nightgown, covered with a shawl for modesty. Her wedding dress lay discarded across a chair. "Mrs. Colton has prepared supper," he said, hovering uncertainly in the doorway. "Are you hungry?" She wasn't, but recognized she needed to eat. "Yes, thank you. I've had your trunk brought up. Your father arranged for it to be delivered from the hotel." That was thoughtful of him. She stood, adjusting the shawl around her shoulders. Randall's eyes remained carefully on her face. "Rebecca, I meant what I said earlier. You have nothing to fear from me. I can sleep in one of the other bedrooms until things change between us." The offer was gentlemanly, considerate. It was also, Rebecca realized with sudden clarity, completely impractical for their situation. "The hands, Mrs. Colton, they believe we married for love. If you sleep elsewhere, they'll wonder why." "I don't give a damn what they think," he said bluntly. "But I do." She squared her shoulders. "I've already been the subject of town gossip once today. I won't invite more speculation. This is our marriage, unusual as it is, and we need to make it believable." He studied her, respect evident in his expression. "As you wish. I can make a pallet on the floor." "Don't be ridiculous," she said, finding strength in practicality. "The bed is large enough. We're adults, Mr. Irving." "Randall," he corrected gently. "If we're to share a bed, even chastely, I think you should use my given name." "Randall," she repeated, the name unfamiliar on her tongue. "Then we are agreed." Supper was a quiet affair, just the two of them at the kitchen table. Mrs. Colton had prepared a hearty meal: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and hovered attentively until Randall gently suggested she retire for the evening. "She means well," he said once they were alone. "But she's curious as a cat. We'll need to agree on our story." Rebecca picked at her food. "What do you suggest?" "The simplest lies are those closest to the truth. We could say we've been corresponding for some time, that I proposed by letter and you accepted. When Thompson abandoned you at the altar, I stepped forward to make good on my promise immediately rather than waiting. That's plausible, I suppose. No one will question it too deeply. People see what they expect to see." He took a sip of coffee. "As for your condition, we'll simply allow people to believe the child came early when the time comes." The matter-of-fact way he discussed her pregnancy without judgment or disgust eased something tight in Rebecca's chest. "You make it sound so simple." "It can be if we're consistent." He hesitated. "May I ask about the father?" "Not out of judgment, but it would be helpful to know if he might return someday with claims on the child." Rebecca's grip tightened on her fork. "Daniel Thompson will not return. He made that very clear in the letter he left for me." She could still see his hurried handwriting. "I'm not ready for a wife, let alone a child. Don't try to find me." "I'm sorry," Randall said quietly. "For what it's worth, any man who would abandon a woman in your condition doesn't deserve either of you." The simple statement, delivered without artifice, brought fresh tears to Rebecca's eyes. She blinked them away, determined not to break down again. "Thank you." Later, after the awkward ritual of preparing for bed in the company of a stranger, Rebecca lay rigid beneath the quilts, acutely aware of Randall's solid presence beside her. He had been true to his word, maintaining a respectful distance, but the intimacy of sharing a bed with any man was overwhelming. "Try to sleep," he said softly. "Tomorrow will be easier." She wasn't sure she believed him, but exhaustion soon pulled her under. Rebecca woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the distant sounds of a ranch already hours into its workday. For one blissful moment, she couldn't recall where she was or why. Then memory returned with crushing force. Abandoned. pregnant, married to a stranger. The bed beside her was empty, the quilts neatly turned back. A note on the pillow, written in a strong, clear hand, explained that Randall had gone to check on a heifer expected to calve but would return for midday dinner. At the foot of the bed, she found her trunk open, her modest collection of clothing neatly arranged, dressing in a simple blue day dress, mercifully not her teaching clothes, which would have been another painful reminder. Rebecca made her way downstairs. She found Mrs. Colton in the kitchen, up to her elbows in bread dough. "Good morning, Mrs. Irving," the older woman beamed. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes, thank you," Rebecca lied, wondering if the cook could see the dark circles beneath her eyes. "Breakfast is keeping warm in the oven." Mr. Irving was up at dawn, as usual. That man works harder than two ordinary fellows. Mrs. Colton chattered happily as she kneaded. "He said to tell you he'd show you around the place proper when he returns. In the meantime, perhaps you'd like to familiarize yourself with the house. As the new mistress, you'll want to know where everything is. Mistress of the house." The title felt foreign, unearned. Yet as Rebecca explored the well-built home more thoroughly in daylight, she began to see the potential. The rooms were spacious but sparsely decorated, clearly arranged by a man with little interest in domestic comforts. A woman's touch was sorely needed: curtains to soften the stark windows, cushions for the hard chairs, perhaps fresh paint in the dreary north-facing rooms. In Randall's office, their office now, she supposed Rebecca found evidence of a methodical, organized mind. Account books were neatly stacked, correspondence filed by date. A large map of the property hung on one wall, carefully annotated in the same strong hand from the morning's note. By midday, she had sketched a mental inventory of what the house contained and what it lacked. The activity gave her purpose, a focus beyond her own tumultuous circumstances. When she heard the front door open and Randall's heavy tread in the hallway, she was seated in the kitchen helping Mrs. Colton prepare vegetables for the noon meal. "Ladies," he greeted them, removing his hat. His eyes found Rebecca's, a silent question in their depths. "Good day, Mr. Randall," she corrected herself. "Did your heifer calve successfully?" A smile transformed his serious face. "She did. A healthy bull calf, already standing. Would you like to see them later?" The invitation seemed to please Mrs. Colton enormously. "Oh, how lovely! Your first day as a rancher's wife." Mrs. Irving, after the meal, true to his word, Randall took Rebecca on a tour of the ranch. She had exchanged her house shoes for sturdier boots, grateful that her trunk had included practical footwear. As they walked the property, Randall pointing out buildings, fields, and natural features, Rebecca found herself genuinely interested. The operation was impressive, far more substantial than she had realized from her limited exposure to ranching. "My father started with just 50 head and this parcel here," Randall explained, indicating an area on the south side of the creek. "Built everything else over 30 years of hard work." "And you've continued to expand," she observed. He nodded, a hint of pride in his expression. "Added the north pastures 5 years ago. We run about 800 head now, with plans for more." At the small corral near the calving barn, Randall introduced her to the new mother and calf. The heifer regarded them warily but allowed Randall to approach, his movements slow and confident. "She trusts you," Rebecca noted. "Trust is earned," he said simply. "Consistency, patience, never breaking your word. Works with cattle, horses, people too." The statement hung between them, loaded with significance for their own unusual arrangement. "I don't know the first thing about being a rancher's wife," she admitted as they walked back toward the house. "And I don't know much about being a husband," he countered. "We'll learn together." That evening, after another quiet meal, They sat in the parlor while Randall explained more about the ranch operations. Rebecca found herself asking questions about the cattle market, water rights, plans for the coming season. Her teaching had given her a quick mind for details, and she was surprised to find the business side of ranching fascinating. "You have a good head for figures," Randall observed when she correctly calculated a complex feed-to-weight ratio in her head. "Numbers have always come easily to me," she said. "My students sometimes struggle with mathematics, but I find it logical, comforting even. Would you be interested in helping with the accounts? My handwriting is legible enough, but I often fall behind during busy seasons." The offer startled her. "You would trust me with your financial records. You're my wife," he said simply. "This ranch is as much yours now as mine." The matter-of-fact statement affected her more deeply than any romantic declaration might have. This practical man, with his straightforward approach to their unusual marriage, was offering her true partnership. "I would be happy to help," she said, meaning it. That night, preparing for bed was marginally less awkward than the previous evening. They established a routine. Rebecca changed behind a screen while Randall waited in the hallway. Then he entered after she was settled beneath the covers. They exchanged polite goodnights, maintained their respective sides of the mattress, and eventually slept. Days passed in this fashion, gradually establishing a rhythm to their shared life. Rebecca learned the household routines, made small improvements to the house, and began helping with the ranch accounts. Randall showed her more of the property, introduced her to the hands, and treated her with unfailing courtesy. At the beginning of her second week as Mrs. Irving, Rebecca received a letter from her father, checking on her welfare. Reading between the carefully phrased lines, she could sense his concern, his lingering doubts about the hasty marriage. "I should visit town," she told Randall that evening, "to reassure my father and she hesitated, to establish ourselves as a couple in the community's eyes." He nodded thoughtfully. "Sunday service would be the most efficient. Everyone will be there." The prospect of facing Bandera's townsfolk, their curious stares, their whispered speculations filled Rebecca with dread. But it had to be done. Better to establish their narrative now, before her condition became evident. That Sunday, dressed in her best gown, carefully let out at the waist, Rebecca sat beside Randall in the Irving wagon as they approached town. Her stomach churned with nerves that had nothing to do with her pregnancy. "Remember," Randall said quietly, head high, "you've nothing to be ashamed of. You're Mrs. Randall Irving now, mistress of one of the most prosperous ranches in the county." His words steadied her, as did the warm pressure of his hand covering hers. The gesture seemed unconscious on his part, yet it communicated support, solidarity. The small church was already filling when they arrived. Rebecca felt the wave of attention that swept through the congregation as they entered. Randall's hand remained at the small of her back, a reassuring presence as they made their way to an empty pew. "Rebecca," her father's voice called from nearby. Richard Dale approached, his expression a mixture of relief and lingering concern. "And Mr. Irving." "Please, sir, call me Randall," her husband said, extending his hand. "We're family now." The simple declaration, delivered with such easy confidence, sent a curious warmth through Rebecca's chest. Her father searched Randall's face, then glanced at his daughter. "You look well, Becky," he said finally. "The ranch life seems to agree with you." "It does, Pa," she answered truthfully. "Randall has been." She sought the right word, everything I could hope for in a husband. The service itself passed in a blur of hymns and scripture readings. Rebecca was acutely aware of the sidelong glances, the whispered comments behind hymnals. When Preacher Johnson acknowledged the new couple in our midst, Mr. and Mrs. Irving, A fresh wave of murmurs rippled through the church. After the service, they stood in the churchyard, accepting congratulations from well-wishers whose curiosity was barely disguised beneath their pleasantries. Rebecca maintained a serene smile, grateful for Randall's steady presence beside her. "Such a whirlwind romance," commented Mrs. Peterson, the same woman who had been so pointed at their impromptu reception. "We had no idea you two were acquainted." "Sometimes the heart knows what it wants," Randall replied smoothly, his arm slipping around Rebecca's waist. "When I saw Rebecca standing there in the church that day, I knew I couldn't let another day pass without making her my wife." The romantic declaration, so at odds with his usual practical nature, startled Rebecca. Even more surprising was the way he looked at her as he spoke with genuine warmth, perhaps even admiration. "How fortunate for you both," Mrs. Peterson replied, not quite hiding her skepticism. Rebecca's former fiancé's mother approached next, her pinched face betraying her discomfort. "Mrs. Irving," she said stiffly, "I want to apologize for my son's behavior. It was unconscionable." "No apology needed, Mrs. Thompson," Rebecca replied with dignity. "Everything worked out for the best." "Indeed," the older woman said, her eyes flicking to Randall. "My Daniel always was impulsive." "Clearly you found a more substantial match." After what felt like hours of such exchanges, they finally made their escape. Rebecca sagged with relief as Randall helped her into the wagon. "You were magnificent," he said quietly as they pulled away from town. "Dignified, composed, exactly what was needed." "As were you," she replied. "That story about knowing you couldn't let another day pass, quite poetic for a practical rancher." A faint smile touched his lips. "I may not be one for flowery speech, but I know what people want to hear." And it wasn't entirely false. She glanced at him, surprised. "Oh, when I saw you behind that church, looking so brave despite your heartbreak, I admired your strength." His eyes remained on the road ahead. "I knew then I wanted to help you, to offer what protection I could." The simple honesty of his statement touched her deeply. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not just for today, but for everything." His only response was a nod, but the silence between them felt comfortable, almost companionable. That night, lying beside him in the darkness, Rebecca found herself studying his profile. In sleep, the stern lines of his face softened. He looked younger, almost vulnerable. This man who had married her out of compassion and duty, who asked nothing in return, who treated her with unfailing respect, he was becoming something more than a convenient solution to her disgrace. He was becoming a friend. The thought startled her. Was friendship enough for a marriage? Could affection and respect develop into something deeper with time? She had believed herself in love with Daniel Thompson, but his abandonment had revealed the shallow nature of his feelings. Perhaps Randall's practical approach to marriage partnership, mutual benefit, shared purpose, was more substantial than romantic passion. As summer progressed into autumn, life on the Irving ranch settled into a rhythm that increasingly felt like home to Rebecca. Her days were filled with household management, account keeping, and learning the rhythms of ranch life. She discovered a talent for organization that complemented Randall's practical knowledge, and together they streamlined many of the ranch operations. Her pregnancy, now impossible to hide, became an accepted fact among the ranch hands and Mrs. Colton. True to their plan, everyone assumed the child was Randall's, conceived shortly before their hasty marriage. If they counted the months and found the timing suspicious, no one commented. As her body changed, Rebecca found herself both marveling at and fearing the life growing within her. She had always wanted children, but had imagined experiencing pregnancy with a husband who loved her, who had helped create their child in love. Instead, she had Randall kind, respectful, but maintaining a careful physical distance. One evening in late October, as they sat by the fire after supper, Rebecca felt the baby move for the first time, a definite flutter, like butterfly wings against her ribs. She gasped, her hand flying to her rounded belly. "Rebecca," Randall looked up from his newspaper, concern evident. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she breathed, a smile spreading across her face. "The baby moved, I felt it." His expression shifted to wonder. "Truly?" She nodded, pressing her palm more firmly against the spot. "Here." Without thinking, she reached for his hand, guiding it to rest against her stomach. The moment his large, calloused palm settled against the swell of her belly, she realized the intimacy of the gesture. In nearly 3 months of marriage, this was the most personal contact they had shared. Randall seemed frozen, his hand warm through the fabric of her dress. For several heartbeats, they remained thus, connected by the promise of new life beneath their joined hands. "I don't feel anything," he said finally, his voice oddly rough. "It's still too faint for others to feel," she explained, reluctantly releasing his hand. "But it will grow stronger in the coming weeks." He nodded, withdrawing slowly. But something had changed between them in that brief connection. That night, as they prepared for bed, the routine felt different, charged with an awareness that hadn't been present before. As autumn deepened toward winter, so too deepened the bond between the unlikely couple. Practical discussions about the ranch expanded to include personal histories, hopes, quiet confidences exchanged in the golden lamplight of evening. Rebecca learned about Randall's childhood, his complicated relationship with his demanding father, his dreams for the ranch's future. In turn, she shared stories of her years teaching, her love of books, her close relationship with her own father. The baby, active now and strong enough for Randall to feel its movements, became a shared joy. Rebecca would often find him watching her with an expression of wonder when the child kicked or rolled visibly beneath her skin. He built a cradle with his own hands, working late into the night to surprise her with the beautifully crafted piece. "It's exquisite," she breathed, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "Where did you learn such craftsmanship?" "My grandfather was a carpenter before he turned to ranching," Randall explained, looking pleased at her reaction. "He taught me the basics when I was a boy." As her due date approached, Rebecca found herself contemplating the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. The pain of Daniel's betrayal had faded to a dull memory, overshadowed by the life she was building with Randall. What had begun as a marriage of convenience had evolved into something meaningful, substantial. Was it love? Rebecca wasn't certain. The quiet affection she felt for Randall bore little resemblance to the giddy infatuation she had mistaken for love with Daniel. This was deeper, rooted in respect and genuine admiration. She valued his integrity, his work ethic, his consideration for others. She had come to cherish their evening conversations, to miss his presence when ranch work kept him out late. But did he feel the same? Randall was attentive, kind, increasingly affectionate in small ways, a hand at her back, a gentle touch to her hair, lingering glances when he thought she wasn't looking. Yet he maintained his promise never to press for physical intimacy, sleeping beside her each night with respectful distance between them. December arrived with bitter cold and the promise of snow. Rebecca's time was near, her body heavy and awkward as she moved through her daily tasks. Randall insisted she rest more, taking on additional household duties himself despite the demands of winter ranch work. "You need to conserve your strength," he told her firmly when she protested. "The baby could come any day now." As if summoned by his words, Rebecca woke before dawn the next morning to a sharp pain and a rush of wetness. Panic gripped her momentarily before her teacher's practicality reasserted itself. She turned to wake Randall but found him already alert, watching her with concern. "It's time," she said simply. The hours that followed were a blur of pain and determination. Mrs. Colton, who had assisted at many births, took charge with brisk efficiency. Randall sent one of the hands riding for the doctor in town, then paced the hallway outside their bedroom like a caged mountain lion. When he could stand it no longer, he entered the room, ignoring Mrs. Colton's protests. Rebecca, exhausted and drenched with sweat, reached for his hand. He took it without hesitation, his strong fingers enfolding hers. "You can do this," he said quietly, his faith in her evident. "You're the strongest woman I know." The words gave her courage. With renewed determination, Rebecca focused on the task before her, drawing strength from Randall's steady presence. When the doctor finally arrived, the labor was well advanced. "Not long now, Mrs. Irving," Dr. Williams assured her after his examination. "The baby is positioned well." Randall remained at her side through it all, wiping her brow, supporting her through contractions, murmuring encouragement. In the haze of pain, Rebecca marveled at his unwavering commitment to her, to a child that wasn't his by blood. With a final, tremendous effort, Rebecca brought their child into the world. The lusty cry that filled the room was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. "A boy," the doctor announced, quickly cleaning and swaddling the infant. "A fine, healthy son." Rebecca collapsed back against the pillows, tears of exhaustion and joy streaming down her face. When Dr. Williams placed the tiny bundle in her arms, she gazed in wonder at the perfect, red face of her son. "Randall," she whispered, looking up at her husband. "Come meet your son." He moved closer, his expression a complex mixture of awe and tenderness. Reaching out with one finger, he gently touched the baby's cheek. "He's perfect," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Would you like to hold him?" Randall hesitated, then carefully gathered the swaddled infant into his large hands. The contrast between his weathered strength and the baby's tiny form brought fresh tears to Rebecca's eyes. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "Welcome to the world." In that moment, watching the man who had saved her from disgrace cradle her child with such tender care, Rebecca knew with absolute certainty that what she felt for Randall Irving was love deep, abiding love that had grown not from passion but from partnership, respect, and shared purpose. "What shall we name him?" Randall asked, his eyes still on the baby's face. They had discussed names, of course, but made no final decision. Now, seeing father and son together, for that was what they truly were, regardless of blood, Rebecca knew. "James," she said. "After your father." "James Richard Irving." Randall's eyes met hers, surprise giving way to profound gratitude. "Are you certain?" "Absolutely," she affirmed. "He is your son in every way that matters." Later, when the doctor had gone and Mrs. Colton had helped Rebecca clean up and change into a fresh nightgown, Randall returned to their bedroom. The baby slept peacefully in his new cradle beside the bed. Rebecca, exhausted but content, watched as her husband approached. "You should rest," he said, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. "I will," she promised. "But first, there's something I need to say." He waited, his expression open, attentive. "When you found me behind the church that day, I thought my life was over." She reached for his hand, drawing strength from his touch. "I never imagined that what began as a desperate solution would become the greatest blessing of my life." "Rebecca, please, let me finish." She took a deep breath. "You married me out of compassion, offered protection when I needed it most. You've been patient, kind, respectful. You've become a true partner to me and now a loving father to my son." Her voice wavered. "Our son." Randall's grip on her hand tightened. "What I'm trying to say, Randall Irving, is that somewhere along the way I fell in love with you." The words, once spoken, hung in the air between them. "I understand if you don't feel the same. What you've already given me is more than I had any right to expect, but I wanted you to know." For a long moment, Randall was silent, his expression unreadable. Then, with deliberate care, he brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Rebecca," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion, "I've loved you since the moment you agreed to face the town at my side, head held high despite your broken heart. I've loved you as I watched you make my house a home, my ranch books a model of efficiency, my life a joy instead of mere existence." Tears spilled down Rebecca's cheeks as he continued. "I promised myself I wouldn't speak of love until I was certain you could return it freely, not out of gratitude or obligation. I wanted to earn your heart, not claim it as payment for a debt that never existed." "You have," she whispered. "You've earned it 1,000 times over." With infinite gentleness, Randall leaned forward and kissed her their first true kiss as husband and wife, as two people who had chosen each other not from necessity but from love. From his cradle, little James stirred and whimpered. Randall pulled back with a soft laugh. "Someone objects to being left out," he said, rising to check on the baby. Lifting his son with practiced care, he returned to sit beside Rebecca, cradling James between them. "Our family," he said softly. "Complete." "Not quite," Rebecca said, a smile playing at her lips. "There's room for more, don't you think? In time." The look Randall gave her was filled with promise. "In time," he agreed, his meaning clear. When she had recovered, when they were ready, they would create siblings for James' children born of the love that had grown between them. As winter settled over the Irving ranch, the little family within its walls found warmth in their newfound happiness. The marriage that had begun as an act of compassion had transformed into a union of hearts, proving that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin not with passion but with kindness, respect, and the courage to build something lasting from the ashes of dreams undone. Spring brought new life to the Irving Ranch, calves in the pastures, wildflowers along the creek banks, and a transformed relationship between Rebecca and Randall. Their marriage, now founded on mutual love as well as respect, blossomed in the warming days. The physical distance Randall had maintained out of honor gave way to the natural intimacy of a couple deeply in love. Rebecca discovered a passion within herself that matched her husband's, their nights together a revelation after months of restraint. Little James thrived under their care, growing from a helpless newborn to a curious, smiling infant. Randall was a devoted father, often carrying the baby with him around the ranch, pointing out cattle and horses to the wide-eyed child. Rebecca would find them thus, her husband's deep voice explaining ranching operations to a baby far too young to understand but clearly captivated by his father's attention. "He'll be a rancher before he can walk," she teased one evening, finding them in the barn, James securely cradled in one arm while Randall checked a horse's hoof with his free hand. "Just getting an early start on his education," Randall replied with a grin. "Though his mother being a schoolteacher, I suspect he'll be equally comfortable with books and cattle." The casual reference to her former profession reminded Rebecca that she had once had ambitions beyond being a rancher's wife. While she loved her life with Randall and James, she sometimes missed the intellectual stimulation of teaching. Randall, perceptive as always, noticed her momentary melancholy. "What is it?" "Sometimes I miss teaching," she admitted. "Not enough to return to it. Our life here is everything I could want, but I enjoyed helping young minds grow." He considered this, his expression thoughtful. The Collins family, Over at the East property, they have 3 school-aged children but live too far from town for regular attendance. Mrs. Collins mentioned they're falling behind in their studies. Are you suggesting I could teach them? Rebecca asked, intrigued. Why not? Perhaps 1 or 2 days a week they could come here, or you could ride over there. Other families in the area might be interested too. The idea took root and flourished. By summer, Rebecca had established a small school in the rarely used formal dining room of the Irving Ranch house. 6 children from outlying ranches attended 3 mornings each week, their parents grateful for the education their isolated locations had previously denied them. Randall built proper desks and a blackboard. Mrs. Colton provided lunch for the young scholars. James, now crawling and babbling, became the unofficial mascot of the little school, delighting in the attention from the older children on days when Rebecca taught. Randall would sometimes linger in the doorway, watching with evident pride as his wife guided her students through their lessons. The respect and admiration in his gaze when their eyes met across the room never failed to warm her heart. "You're a natural teacher," he told her one afternoon after the children had departed. "Those young ones are fortunate to have you." "And I'm fortunate to have a husband who supports my interests," she replied, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "Not every man would be so understanding." "Not every man has a wife worth understanding," he countered, drawing her closer. Their happiness, hard-won and precious, seemed complete. Yet as James's first birthday approached, Rebecca began to notice subtle changes in her body of familiar tenderness, a slight nausea in the mornings. With a mixture of excitement and trepidation, she realized she might be carrying their second child. When the doctor confirmed her suspicion, Rebecca waited until evening to share the news with Randall. After James was settled in his crib, now moved to the adjacent bedroom, she joined her husband on the porch where he often sat after supper, enjoying the cool evening air. "Are you feeling all right?" he asked as she settled beside him. "You've been quiet today." "I'm more than all right," she said, taking his hand and placing it against her still flat stomach. "We're going to have another child, Randall, in early spring." His expression transformed from confusion to wonder to joy in the space of heartbeats. "Truly," she nodded, suddenly tearful. "This one is truly ours, conceived in love." "As is James," he said firmly. "Blood doesn't make a family, Rebecca, love does." "I know," she whispered. "But this child will be loved exactly as much as his or her brother," Randall said, gathering her into his arms. "No more, no less." His unwavering commitment to James, his absolute refusal to differentiate between the children, only deepened Rebecca's love for him. Here was a man of true integrity, whose promises were as solid as the foundation of their home. The news of Rebecca's pregnancy was celebrated throughout the ranch. Mrs. Colton immediately began knitting tiny garments. The hands offered hearty congratulations to their boss. In town, the announcement was met with warm wishes. Any lingering gossip about the timing of their marriage long since overshadowed by the evident devotion between the Irvings. As her pregnancy progressed, Rebecca continued teaching, though she reduced the schedule to twice weekly as her energy waned. The ranch prospered under Randall's careful management, allowing for improvements to the house and expansion of the herd. James grew into a sturdy toddler, taking his first steps across the kitchen floor to his father's outstretched arms. On a crisp March morning in 1877, with snow still clinging to the north-facing slopes, Rebecca gave birth to their daughter. The labor was shorter than with James, though no less intense. Randall remained by her side throughout, his steady presence her anchor through the pain. "She's beautiful," he whispered when the midwife placed the infant in Rebecca's arms, "just like her mother." They named her Elizabeth Colton Irving, honoring both Rebecca's closest friend and the woman who had become like a grandmother to James. Mrs. Colton wept when they told her, insisting she was far too practical for such foolishness, even as she dabbed at her eyes. With 2 young children and the small school to manage, Rebecca's days were full to overflowing. Yet she had never been happier. The hardships and heartbreak that had led her to Randall now seemed a distant memory, the pain transformed into appreciation for the life they had built together. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, James playing with wooden blocks at their feet while Elizabeth slept in Rebecca's arms, Randall broke their comfortable silence. "I received a letter today," he said, "from Daniel Thompson." Rebecca stiffened, instinctively drawing Elizabeth closer. "What does he want?" To apologize, apparently. Randall's voice was carefully neutral. "He's settled in Colorado, married now, says he's grown up, realized the magnitude of what he did." "After nearly 3 years," Rebecca said, a trace of bitterness in her tone. "How convenient for his conscience." Randall reached for her hand. He asked if he might someday meet James. Cold fear gripped Rebecca's heart. "No, absolutely not. James is our son." "I agree," Randall said quickly. "I've already written back declining. I just thought you should know." She relaxed slightly, though the mention of Daniel had cast a shadow over the peaceful evening. "Does he know we have Elizabeth now, too?" "I didn't mention her," Randall said. "I kept my response brief. Made it clear that while I don't bear him ill will, I consider the matter closed." Rebecca nodded, grateful for Randall's handling of the situation. Still, a lingering unease remained. What if he comes here anyway? "Then he'll find a family united," Randall said firmly. "A boy who knows only one father, me, and a man prepared to protect what's his." His expression softened as he looked at their son, now abandoned his blocks to climb into his father's lap. "But I don't think it will come to that. Thompson may have matured enough to feel remorse, but I doubt he has the courage to face us in person." Randall's assessment proved accurate. No further communication came from Daniel Thompson, and as the years passed, the brief reminder of their unusual beginning faded from memory. James grew into a sturdy, thoughtful boy with his mother's quick mind and his father's steady nature. Elizabeth, with her father's dark hair and her mother's blue eyes, developed a spirited personality all her own. In the spring of 1880, Rebecca gave birth to their 3rd child, a son they named Thomas, after Randall's childhood friend lost in the war. The Irving family was now complete. 3 healthy children, a thriving ranch, and at its center, a marriage built on the firmest foundation of all mutual respect grown into enduring love. On the morning of their 5th wedding anniversary, Rebecca woke to find Randall already dressed and standing by the window, gazing out at the ranch that had prospered under their joint care. "Good morning," she said, sitting up. "You're up early." He turned, a smile warming his features. "I wanted to check on the new foal before the children woke, but I also wanted to give you this before the day gets away from us." From his pocket, he withdrew a small package wrapped in plain brown paper. "Randall, you didn't need to, I wanted to," he interrupted, sitting beside her on the bed. 5 years deserves commemoration." Inside the package, Rebecca found a delicate gold locket. When opened, it revealed tiny portraits of their 3 children on one side and Randall on the other. "It's beautiful," she whispered, tears pricking at her eyes. "I thought you could wear it close to your heart," he said, helping her fasten it around her neck. "A reminder of the family we've built together." "As if I could ever forget," she said softly, leaning into his embrace. "You saved me, Randall Irving." "No," he countered, tipping her chin up to meet his gaze. "We saved each other. I was existing, not living, before you came into my life. You gave me purpose beyond just building a ranch. You gave me a home, a family, a reason." His words echoed her own feelings so perfectly that Rebecca could only respond with a kiss, pouring 5 years of gratitude, partnership, and love into the gesture. Later that day, as the family celebrated with a picnic by the creek, Rebecca watched Randall teaching James to skip stones across the water, Elizabeth clapping with delight at each successful throw, baby Thomas sleeping peacefully in his basket nearby. The scene embodied everything she had once thought forever beyond her reach: a loving husband, beautiful children, a home filled with joy. 5 years earlier, abandoned and desperate behind Bandera's chapel, she had thought her life was ending. Instead, it had only just begun. As if sensing her thoughts, Randall looked up, catching her eye across the grassy bank. The smile they exchanged contained volumes: shared memories, overcome challenges, promises kept, a future still unfolding. In that moment, Rebecca knew with absolute certainty that the words spoken by a practical rancher to a desperate woman on the worst day of her life, "I'll be your husband now," had been not merely a solution to an immediate problem, but the beginning of the greatest blessing either of them could have imagined. Their love story, unlikely as its beginning had been, was still being written day by day, not in grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but in the steady rhythm of shared work, mutual respect, and quiet joy that defined their life together on the Irving Ranch in Bandera, Texas. And that, Rebecca thought as Randall gathered their eldest son in his arms and crossed the stream to join her, was the truest romance of all.